Welcome back, everyone. How are you all doing today? I know it's been a while since we've made a discussion video, but here goes. Now, I've had some time to mull over the potential changes of patch 6.7, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. I'm going to give you my thoughts on that. They're not going to be exhaustive. We're going to touch on the more significant parts and the discussion that follows, and of course, this is not scripted, if you couldn't already tell. I'm trying. I've been trying actually for a while now to keep this topic as short as possible, but the shortest discussion I've been able to come up with so far has been nearly an hour long, and I don't want to bore you with that kind of a video, so I'm going to try to boil down the thoughts on everything in this discussion video, and we're going to still touch upon some of the more significant things, but I'm going, once again, this is my final attempt to make this like less than a half hour for you guys. So here goes. We're just going to get into the meat of this. So let's start with the two survivor perks that are getting nerfed, the big ones. Boon Circle of Healing and Dead Hard. Boon Circle of Healing did something that no other perk did, and that is it gave survivors upwards of 4 additional perks: Self-Care, Botany Knowledge, Max Stacks, Desperate Measures, with no requirements being needed to be met. So just free max level Desperate Measures, and an additional healing buff that may or may not exist. And that's in addition to any other healing buffs they already were bringing to the game. So it would actually double up and increase their speed faster. This perk was by no means fair. This was a one perk game changer, and actually did swing a lot of games in favor of Survivor that a killer could have easily won just because of how much it can break a killer's momentum. This perk absolutely needed to be nerfed, and keep in mind, it's still a strong perk. Botany Knowledge is still very, very strong, and this just gives Botany Knowledge to every survivor. The thing is, it's not broken. It's not overpowered. And that's the one thing you never heard any of the defenders of this perk say, because they obviously don't want to admit, openly at least, the truth, or the thing that they know. So instead they sit there and they convince themselves that, no, this perk is perfectly fine. It's healthy. It's totally fair. Please, let's be real. This is the one thing we need to start having in Dead by Daylight. Honest conversations. Perk was broken. The reason people liked it is because it was a broken perk. And that's it. None of the people crying that it's a dead perk now. Well, two things about it. It's one, they just don't want to say the quiet part out loud. They only liked it because it was a broken perk. And two, this is something I actually love. Isn't it ironic that the people crying the loudest about Circle of Healing being nerfed are the same people who would dump on survivors for running self-care? Isn't it ironic? Self-healing is a problem, unless it's absolutely busted and unfair. So, yeah. But speaking of busted and unfair perks, let's get on with the second one, Dead Hard. Dead Hard is an absolutely busted perk. It is absolutely broken. It is completely unfair. And for anyone who wants to sit there and say, oh, but it takes so much skill to use Dead Hard. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. You know what took skill? You know what took something? The killer who beat you in 2 chases back to back. It did not take comparative any degree of skill for you to push E. And that's the truth. That's the reality. Clench your butt cheeks and eat a chainsaw. Clench your butt cheeks and eat a hatchet. That's all you gotta do, is just clench your butt cheeks and, hey, I win because I lost. That is the reality of Dead Hard. You win because you lose. In order to get any value out of Dead Hard at all whatsoever, you need to lose 2 chases back to back. Dead Hard is a broken perk. It is an unfair perk. It has always been an unfair perk, and it needs some form of change or to be eliminated altogether. And in this case, the nerf, I think, is reasonably fair. They're tying the value of the perk to safe hook rescues, which means there is a hard limit on the number of Dead Hards available in a match. And this is what makes it fair. There is a hard limit. It's not limited to just one, but it is a hard limit on the number of uses that you're going to see in a match. And like a lot of perks, for example, Pop Goes the Weasel or Pain Resonance, that are based on getting hooks. They reward killer when a hook is made. These are very fair, but there's a hard limit. And like those perks, they also significantly lose value as the match goes on. Usually around the time that a killer has 6 hooks, all 3 of those perks, Pop Goes the Weasel, Pain Resonance, and Dead Hard, well, soon Dead Hard, all will lose significant value. And for the survivor side of this, usually for the killer side, it's at 6 hooks, you're likely to have 1 person dead, or you have 3 people on death hook. The game is completely going in your favor. At this point, you're just going to start eliminating players, or you have already eliminated players, and you no longer need the gen regression that you're getting out of it. So early game, it can have a really strong effect, but unless survivors are rushing gens and you're forced into a 3-gen, which it can provide a lot of value there's not a lot of value you're going to get out of it in the end game. You've already got the value that you're going to get. Same thing with Dead Hard. Dead Hard is going to have a lot more value within the first 6 uses, 5 to 6 uses of it. That's where you're going to have a lot of the value out of it. And it's because having a set limit means that survivors are not going to be using Dead Hard offensively like they used to in the past. They're not going to be body blocking with Dead Hard or blocking a door, taking a hit, and then using Dead Hard to continue blocking that door and then run off after they get hit. They're not going to be just swarming a survivor and then taking a hit and then using Dead Hard to take a hit, which can make a chase take upwards of 7 hits just to down 1 survivor. I'm not even kidding. And if the team runs off and heals fast enough, they could just continue cycling each other out. Especially if they're running Vigil, and they'll have Dead Hard again, and it's just rinse, repeat all over again. And the chase can literally just keep going. It can be never ending. I've seen it happen. A lot of top tier survivor squads who just abuse these mechanics, like they do so because they know, like they know they can get away with it without anything going wrong because they have all these perks to abuse. And again, that's what's going on with Dead Hard. That's why people are complaining about Dead Hard being a dead perk now, quote unquote. Not because it's not going to retain its strength. It's still going to be a very strong perk. It's just not going to be as much of a threatening perk. It's not going to be something that survivors can use offensively, or they can use to threaten the killer to not hit them. They're going to actually have to use Dead Hard for its intended purpose, which is defensively. And that is such a significant change. Even though it doesn't actually kill the perk, what it does is it kills by and large, it kills the offensive uses for this perk, meaning that survivors who are just abusing it aren't going to be able to abuse it as flagrantly as they had before. And that's the real reason people are upset about it, sir. Let's just be honest. Let's be honest. Anyway, moving on. Now let's talk about the nerfs to Colubrine, Overcharge, and Pain Resonance. Let's start with Colubrine Overcharge. This is a completely unnecessary nerf. Oh, let's be real. If you're having trouble with these perks, the problem is you and your team. You're not doing generators. How do you counter Colubrine and Overcharge? Do generators. Colubrine and Overcharge at its maximum gen regression. It's 300% gen regression? Now I know there's a lot of survivors who sit there and cry about that and they say it's so unfair. Oh, it's unfair. But do you even know what 300% gen regression means? Do you even know what it looks like? Well, let's again be honest. These complaints are coming from ignorant survivors. Ignorant survivor mains who want to have an easy game. They basically want the game to be autopilot and play itself for them and want to have no consequences and always want to win. But the reality is like for Colubrine and Overcharge, these were meaningful forms of gen defense, not just because they caused gen regression, but also because they provided information. Now, more to the point, the reason why these perks were not a problem was because even at 300% gen regression, the max speed you would get from Colubrine Overcharge, that was still slower than gen progression by 1 survivor. one survivor takes 90 seconds to complete a generator. Call of Brine Overcharge combined would take from getting a generator down from 99% to 0% to coal takes 155 seconds. That is 2 minutes and 35 seconds, as opposed to the 1 minute and 30 seconds that it takes to complete a generator. As one person with no perks, no speed up perks, no toolbox, no brand new part, no nothing. These two perks still at their fastest was slower than one person doing a generator. So if you're having trouble with this perk, I mean, it's the same thing for survivors who are struggling with old Ruin, not old Ruin, the original release Ruin, just Ruin in general, when Ruin was a 1-to-1 regression. Like 1-to-1 regression and progress speeds for one survivor, they were the same. They were the exact same, 400% regression speed. Like, if you were struggling with this, you just weren't doing generators. Them's the facts. Them's the facts. So for every survivor complaining and crying about these perks, it's just a real mark of ignorance that they don't understand these basic mechanics of the game, these fundamental mechanics of the game. Gens get completed 4 times faster than they regress normally. So when you see 300% regression and you don't understand what that means, and you think that's so unfair sounding, it's because you don't understand the basic maths. That's what it comes down to. You don't understand basic maths. So either you're ignorant or you're stupid. So, the truth hurts, and these facts are just right there. If you do not understand that, then that's a problem. And in fact, Choi made a fantastic video a while back. I'll link it in the description below, that shows the regression speed from Overcharge and Call of Brine. You can see it for yourself when compared to a survivor completing a generator alone with no perks and no items. So, come on. Let's be real. If you're not getting your gens done, the issue is you and your team. That was it. These perks didn't need to be nerfed. Did not need to be nerfed. And it honestly feels like they were just being nerfed because survivors were getting some pretty hefty nerfs that were necessary. And that's it. The next one is Pain Res. Now, I mulled this one over for a while, and honestly, this perk did need to be nerfed. Unfortunately, Pain Res did incentivize camping and tunneling for easy, quick hooks that killers could use to just keep regressing generators. And that itself is not really fair. Pop Goes the Weasel didn't do that because for a killer to gain value out of the gen regression, they had to go and travel to another gen. And even old Pop, where it was 60 seconds that they could hold it, they still had to make a decision about which gen to kick. And even if they downed another survivor to get value out of it, they would still have to go out of their way, kick a gen, come back, pick up the survivor, and then hook them. So there really wasn't any benefit to camping and tunneling when using Pop Goes the Weasel, which is why it's so mind-blowing that this perk was nerfed twice, heavily. But yeah, so Call of Brine, due to the nature of Scourge hooks, does unfortunately incentivize camping and tunneling, so I very much so agree with the nerf. It's a heavy nerf. It does basically destroy this perk because the perk will have it. A perk like Pain Res is only valuable up to 6 hooks. The fact that it's limited to just 4 hooks means that it's really like the actual value of it drops off well before it actually peaks, well before it's actually made any real use or meaningful impact in a match. And that's even with the 20% gen regression. So this was actually a good choice. But now on to the really, really dumb choices. So Overzealous is getting a buff. Why? 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 When you're taking away some of the most meaningful gen defense from a killer, now you're giving survivors a buff. You're taking a perk that was actually pretty fair, because it required breaking a totem, there was only a set number of times survivors could get this bonus, and it would be a bigger bonus if they got a hex totem, which was even a lower chance. So there was a nice counterplay, an incentive to breaking totems, even if they were haunted grounds. But now you just have this buff that can be applied when survivors are running boon totems. So great. Now we have survivors who are going to run full gen defense builds and Shadowborn. Not Shadowborn, Shadow Step. They're going to be running full gen progress builds. They're going to be running, you're going to see it Overzealous, you're going to see Resilience, because people are just going to be injured, then go hit a totem, boon that up, so now they have both Resilience and Overzealous, and then Prove Thyself, and they'll 99 their heal with their med kit. So now you have even faster gens with less gen regression. This is insane. This is stupid. There's no other way to paint this. Buffing this perk in this regard and making it also have more gen progression is like there's such a disconnect in the reality with these devs. This is the dumbest thing they could do, and I feel like they're just doing it just to say, oh, survivors, don't worry, we know we nerfed some perks of yours, but here, you're gonna have this unnecessary buff to this perk. So I know we made 2 perks fair, but here, we'll break this one for you. Why would you do that? That's so dumb. It's just incredibly dumb. And then the healing change. Oh my god, the healing change. This has to be the dumbest change I have ever seen in this game. The healing is fine. Med kits were a problem. Yes, they needed to be nerfed. And you know what? With the way that they're going to be done now, they're fair. That's good. That's okay. Fair is good. But healing itself didn't need a nerf. That is a shadow nerf to so many killer survivor perks. We'll make it. We're gonna live. We'll make it. Botany knowledge, desperate measures, self-care. All these perks, all the healing perks across the board are getting a massive nerf because of it. Because a lot of their speed bonuses are percentage based. They're based on the overall time it takes to get something else done. So, they're going to be nerfed. They're going to be getting a hefty nerf with that. And it's just going to be a bad state, because that's what you're going to start seeing is killers aren't just going to run Sloppy Butcher. They're going to be running all sorts of add-ons that cause mangled and hemorrhaging. So they're going to get free Sloppy Butcher in addition to whatever perks they have. So, yeah, this is a problem. This is easily a problem. It was at a good spot. I wouldn't necessarily say it's perfect, but at the very least, I'll say that it was in a Goldilocks zone where it was fair. It was fast enough that survivors could stop a killer's momentum if they were smart, if they were quick about it, and they acted decisively. They were able to push back against a killer's pressure, and they were able to pressure a killer back because of the healing speeds. But at the same time, if a killer was vigilant and was spreading the damage out and hitting survivors and actually repelling survivors and chasing survivors meaningfully, usually by ending in some form of a hit, then they could have also pressured the survivors back. So there was a real good back and forth. Now this is all going to be on one side. So survivors are going to be, especially, yes, now using Resilience, then they're going to be using Overzealous, then they're going to be using Prove Thyself, then they're going to be running probably Shadow Step, so it makes it even harder to find them when they're running. So now you're going to have Shadow Step all over the map with 3 gen regression perks on who knows how many survivors, and they're just going to be flying through generators. And killers aren't going to have the meaningful gen regression. All they're going to have is the fact that they've reduced survivors to 1 health state. And if we know anything from certain killers like Plague, that can have almost no effect. I mean, it can be pretty impactful, but Plague and Legion have showed us that it really doesn't matter. They could still be beaten by full injured teams. So this is just a bad change. It's bad on the it didn't need to happen. It didn't need to happen. And honestly, the game is dead. If this one change makes it alive, there's some of the other changes, the the overcharge and Call O'Brien change, it's not going to kill the game. The consequence of that will kill the game. This change, however, the healing change, will kill the game if it goes live. It'll be dead within 3 months, because survivors just aren't going to want to tolerate that kind of crap. The games are going to become crazy sweaty. We're just going to see more tunneling being incentivized, and that's what's going to happen. It's going to actually incentivize tunneling and even camping. Like, why? The killer doesn't have to worry. All they have to do is slap all the survivors around hook one, and now it takes so long to heal. It's a bad state. It's bad. Finally, this brings me to one major point, where a lot of the complaints I see coming from, specifically at the survivor side, or their celebrations, they're both their complaints and their celebrations for what things are being nerfed. It's something we need to discuss, especially among survivors, and why the ones who are crying and saying these updates they're all killer sided. The devs only care about what the killer feels. Well, it's very understandable. Part of it comes down to ignorance. It really does. It just comes down to player ignorance. But at the same time, it's also understandable because this is the way the game has been designed. The game mechanically is survivor-sided. And the reason the game is mechanically survivor-sided, discussed this in the past, is because the game is not a 4v1. It is a co-op free-for-all, with the killer being a foil. The killer is not actually the enemy. The survivors are trying to escape. They're not trying to defeat the killer. That's the thing that people forget about this game, the original design of this game. It's not a true ASIN. It's not a 4v1. But with more updates and Swifts acting like it's a 4v1, more survivors wanting it to be played like it's a 4v1, the devs pushing the design into being a 4v1, we're starting to see a lot of the issues that need to be balanced. And those, unfortunately for survivors, are a lot on their end, because no longer does it matter that the individual survivor is protected. So, yes, on the one hand, it comes from ignorance from the other side, not understanding the mechanics, but at the same time, it is just ignorance on that regard. The game is survivor-sided, and it's easy to feel like all you're doing is getting nerfed into the ground, when things that are really unfair, they might be fair in an individual context, in the solo context, but once you put it into a Swift, even a two-man Swift, start to become really, really, really unfair really quickly. So it's really easy to feel like the game is being killer-sided when you're seeing so many nerfs on your side. The reality is, survivors being nerfed are often bringing survivors into balance. Survivors getting buffed are to compensate for more significant nerfs that need to happen. And so you have this topsy-turvy going on where, sometimes you have some fair things or some significant unfair things are being made fair, and then you have something that was fair and now it's being made unfair, and oftentimes to a significant enough degree that it's like the devs didn't really make much of a change in the balance of the game at all. So it's very, very easy to see that. But at the same time, killers get nerfed a lot, and there's the heavy belief that this is because it's to make survivors feel like they're not being picked on by the devs. And the reality is, you're not being picked on. The survivors who are complaining about this, who think all this is killer-sided, you're not being picked on by the devs. The game is being made fair. The reason you're feeling like you're being nerfed and picked on is because you got comfortable in the power role. That's the truth. And that's the thing that we don't hear a lot of people talking about, especially survivor mains, and especially anyone who's complaining about like Dead Harder or Circle of Healing being nerfed. The thing that they're not going to tell you is the only reason they play this is because they know these perks are broken, because they can make so many sick plays for their community, for their audience, or for their YouTube viewers. With these perks, they can really abuse the hell out of them and have themselves a grand old time. But of course, you'll never hear them in open discussion saying that, yes, we like these perks because they are broken. Though they'll enjoy them, they'll abuse the hell out of them, but they'll never say the quiet part out loud. So yeah, so for people who know that the game is actually survivor-sided, they're not being honest with you. And for the people who feel like they're being bullied by the devs or feel like Survivor's being picked on by the devs, it's just pure ignorance. And I know some of you are not going to want to hear that. I know you're not going to like that. You know you're not going to agree with it. But, there are people who still think the earth is flat. Not everyone's going to agree with the truth. And no one likes having the truth just put in their face so bluntly like this. It is the reality of it. You feel picked on, not because you're being picked on, but because an unfair role is being made fair, and that requires a lot of nerfing. So, yeah, it doesn't feel good, but at the end of the day, it's what's required for the long-term health of the game. And that's something that we really do need to have that conversation. It's really at the heart of this. It goes even to the same thing like with the complaints with Skull Merchant. And why Skull Merchant was nerfed. I was going to make a guide originally about how to play Skull Merchant really well and how to counter Skull Merchant, but there's no point. There's no point because they nerfed her. They nerfed the crap out of her because people cried, because some people didn't want to bother learning how to play her because they're either their favorite comp teams or their favorite content creator only said, oh, she's ever good at a 3-gen, or the comp team only used her for 3-gen. And all they did was they played the lowest skill means to win. They didn't take the time to understand her powers. Just like in a lot of cases with Dead by Daylight and they're up in a lot of the updates, not a lot of people sit there and try to take the time to understand the long-term consequences of mechanical changes or certain changes or even the core mechanics and why these changes have certain effects on them. People just don't take that time. And this is the crux of the conversation that needs to be had. If people actually took time to learn how to play Skull Merchant, more players would be saying she's nurse tier, because she is nurse tier. She is a very strong killer in the hands of a good juggler, as long as there's meaningful gen defense available, because good jugglers depend on gen defense. This is something we learned back when old Ruin was around. Ruin, before Pop was nerfed, and even then, when Pop was nerfed only down to 45 seconds, if you played anyone who was not Nurse or Blight, you needed to be a good juggler. And especially even before Blight was around, you needed to be a good juggler. You needed to know how to work the map, how to play the macro game and the long game. We don't have that anymore. Survivors don't want to bother learning how to play against different killers, and killers don't want to learn how to play, they just want to learn how to win. I mean, just because you can win doesn't mean you know how to play. Doesn't mean you understand the fundamental mechanics. And these are the important things that we need to be talking, and people need to be more open about. Anyways, those are my thoughts. Sorry it took so long to get this video out. This video it's been a struggle to try to get this video as short as it is, and I know this is a bit of a rant at the end. I do have another video planned, and it's going to be discussing 3-genning. 3-genning, why it happens, the fact that it's actually hard designed into each map. I bet you guys didn't know that. 3-gens are hard designed into each map by the devs deliberately, and literally any killer can do it. So we'll be talking about that and how to counter it and how to and whatnot. So that'll be the next discussion. Sorry that it took so long to get a discussion video to you guys. I thank you for your patience. I thank you for coming in and watching and sticking through to the end and hearing these thoughts. I know this wasn't scripted, but there's so many things that need to be discussed just from this one update alone, and it's just so hard to keep it down in a reasonable time. But that's going to do it for me. I'm going to let all of you guys go. I, once again, thank you for your time, and I'm going to see all of you guys in the next video.